All right. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much for joining me here on Adobe Live, Behance, Creative Cloud, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter Periscope. My name is Jason Levine, Principal Evangelist for Adobe, and we are here this week between 9:30 and 11:30 a.m. Pacific Time with a live stream event in lieu of the NAB conference. Of course, none of us could be there this year because of all the things going on in the world, but we wanted to bring you something a little different, a little special, and still showcase to you some of the great new features that we just brought to the digital video and audio applications. So all new updates across Premiere, After Effects, Audition, Character Animator yesterday. And we've got product team members, we've got amazing customers, lots of really amazing things to show you here. And of course, we have live interactive chats happening all over the web. So really, we want to drive you to bring the conversation to Adobe Live. So that's behance.net/Adobe Live. Also, you can ask questions in the Premiere Pro Facebook channel as well, and I'll be monitoring Twitter and all the other avenues as well to bring those questions to our guests. So just a real quick schedule showcase here. So coming up with me in just a moment, we have my colleague Dacia Saenz. We're going to be talking about creative tools in Premiere Pro, specifically around graphics workflows. And we're going to show a little bit of After Effects as well, and actually get into some pretty intense After Effects expression use for text, animated text, and Mogurt creation. And then at 10:30 Pacific time, we've got Eric DeMusi, who's going to be talking about how he did his budget indie feature film with 400 VFX shots. This is one of those sessions. It's pretty darn mind-blowing to see the kind of work that he did with a very small crew, very inspirational, and it's exactly the kind of thing that I think will make many of you just want to go. And if you're not already using After Effects or shooting movies, you're going to want to do this, and you're going to try some of the techniques it's going to show you. All right, so without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. My first guest is a good friend of mine. She is part of the motion graphics quality engineering team. She's been at Adobe for a long time. You've met her and you've seen her at Adobe at NAB before. It is my good friend and colleague, Dacia Saenz. How are you doing, Dacia?
Hi, Jason. I'm great. How are you? Welcome to
Doing
my
well.
home office.
That's right. Sorry, and I left my lower third on there for a second. Sorry about that. So, well, it's so lovely to have you here. And, again, here we are kind of all in our remote locations doing this special presentation. And I was just kind of teeing it up. We're going to be talking a lot about motion graphics in Premiere, but really you're going to kind of deep dive into Mogurts. And I thought maybe we could start by just kind of having you give an explanation to everybody of really what is a Mogurt. We use this a lot internally. We've also had a lot of funny like memes and things created around Mogurt, because that's actually just the file extension, right? MOGRT. Maybe you could give kind of a brief explanation of what it is and kind of how they're used.
Absolutely. Yeah. My favorite way to talk about motion graphics templates is I have a great analogy. You walk into Home Depot as a person that hasn't really maybe done a lot of renovations to your house. There's an overwhelming amount of tools and supplies and things, and you're not really quite sure where to start. I think that a lot of people feel that way about walking into After Effects. They know that they can do a lot of powerful things with After Effects, but we're figuring out where to start and what to do can be pretty intimidating. And so I think that the most beautifully the motion graphics templates has done is create this bridge between people who have a lot of experience making them and can do a lot of really magical things with them, being able to sort of curate a set of tools that they can package up into a little capsule and shoot on over to you, a person who might not have as much experience, where you are more comfortable in your environment. In Premiere, you can stay in your ecosystem.
Right.
You have this thing that you can use now where you have just a small toolkit where you can still change things and manipulate things and feel a little bit like a wizard, but you didn't ever have to walk into After Effects, So, so I think they have a lot of power in them. They can be as dynamic and have as many different controls as possible, where you can let someone really just take over, or they can be as limited and as basically designers would, a nod to designers. They can really put a lot of guardrails up so that film editors who are not designers can't actually make something look terrible or choose colors that are conflicting, so
right.
they really just help solidify the spectrum of what's possible, and they're exciting.
And actually, you just raised a really good point, because one of the things that I know I've talked a lot about in terms of trying to get people into the idea of using motion graphics templates is specifically when you're working with a design team, right? Or let's just say, you might be in a very small production team, but you've got people who are kind of doing the look, the branding, the colors, and all of these things. And these are really, all jokes aside, we make jokes about this even at NAB shows, like, the editor gets a hold of the graphics and changes the font and changes the kerning. But this is exactly it. If you're designing the look and the brand, that needs to be consistent. So as the Mogurt creator, and you're going to show some of this in After Effects in a little bit.
Yeah.
You can minimize what the editor can change, and that's not
or
to minimize.
You can change too, like
exactly.
Creator, and you created a nice brand and look and feel. You can have this thing that you can reuse over and over again in multiple ways. So that's the other thing. It's just such a good time saver. In the old days, you'd have to go back to After Effects, even if you were doing it yourself. You accidentally spelled someone's name wrong, or you got their title wrong. You have to go back in, retype everything, re-export, re-import, alt-replace. It's like there's no need for that anymore. You just drag your motion graphics template into your project. You can use the same lower third with the same design and uniquely change the name or whatever you need to for those things. And they're these little independent parcels of motion graphics that can really make your project shine.
And I think that's kind of the cool thing too, because again, it's not even so much that you want to minimize what the editor can change, but again, if I'm kind of in that process and I know I need to use a graphic or a lower third, I actually don't want to think about the things that I don't need to modify, right? I don't want to be concerned with, is it the right color? Is it in the right position? Is it, appropriately placed based on the frame size or aspect ratio? And that's when, I don't know if you're going to go into a little bit about some of the responsive tools that we have in Premiere for that. But this is exactly it. And I know that, when I'm getting Mogurts that are created from others, that's the beauty. I actually say minimize as much as you can. We added the ability to change like fonts and styles, but we don't know. I don't always want that. Sometimes I just want to drag it in, change the text if need be, and just keep moving.
Exactly. And the cool thing is that you can also make them in Premiere. So we have a more lightweight version. I think that's where I'll start before we deep dive into After Effects. I made something really silly and fun. I don't know if we're sharing the screen yet.
Yeah, so okay, I can go ahead and why don't we get into it here? Sorry, I've got panels.
So I did a pre-recording just because time and technology and all of those things. So I've got a little time lapse here that I can. We're not going to sit through the 12 minutes of it because we don't have that much time. But I'm going to scrub through it. But a lot of people that I meet sometimes are unaware that we have something called the Essential Graphics panel. And the thing is that it's a very multi-purpose panel. It's where you keep your Mogurts stored. You can sort them by most recent. You can add keywords to them. You can link to other folders. There's lots that you can do, but you can also build your own Premiere Mogurts within Premiere proper. So here, I actually have one of my favorite things in life. I think we're all looking for a little bit of relief and a way to de-stress. And one of the ways that I do that is an Instagram account called Cats on Synthesizers in Space. So this is my homage to them. So here I am. I'm building out a really basic flat design synthesizer. And one of the things that I want to note that I'm doing here is I'm reusing a lot of elements. You can duplicate layers. Actually, I'm going to pause it here too real quick just to point something out. So, I'm duplicating a lot of layers. You can rename all of your layers just like you would. This layer stack works like any other in Photoshop, in Illustrator, in AE, really matches that design. Reusing elements by duplicating the layers and then using your keyboard shortcuts to nudge things over. That was introduced, I believe, at last year's NAB.
That's right. Yeah.
That's the things that can really help just keep you moving quicker, so that if you want to nudge, command with an arrow key, add shift to nudge by 10 pixels.
Right.
There's
Also,
a
the
lot of ways.
snapping lines, right? The snapping lines inside of the
Yeah,
and grid
snap
and
going
guides. Yeah.
Yeah, and grids and guides are coming up here in a little bit. But then we have this other ability. We added there it is. You can change the line caps on these. So I'm going to change these to round caps, so they look a little bit more like dials. And then here pretty soon, I'm going to enable our grids and guides, which you can do that, as you can see here. Just use your button editor, add them to your most commonly used buttons, and enable them. And pretty soon, you can basically create as many guides as you want. The other cool thing about this is that you can save these guides,
Right.
and
they're shareable inside of After
import
Effects.
them
Right?
and share them, and you can import them into After Effects. So let's say you're working with a team of people, or you yourself, you just have these certain dimensions that you want to make sure that you're always staying consistent with. You can share, essentially like a Mogert file. Now we have a .guides file, and that can be shared across teams, across your computer systems, etc. So here
Dacia, before you move on to, I just want to emphasize also, because we're kind of blowing through this pretty quickly. This was huge, right, bringing this into Premiere, because this was kind of the fundamental piece that was, I mean, look, it was still V1 prior to this, right? So once you had guides and you had the ability to snap and really all of those keyboard shortcuts that you just mentioned, now it feels, in terms of design, familiar to what people are used to in Photoshop, familiar to what people are used to in After Effects. And this made it a place where you could, even as an editor who's not, like you said, maybe you have some intimidation going into After Effects, you could now create these things here with some confidence that things are positioned correctly. And it's familiar with the other apps that you're commonly using anyway.
Absolutely. And, we're not going to, the Premiere environment is never going to, or is never meant to replace the depth of tools that you're able to use in Illustrator or in Photoshop or After Effects. But sometimes you want to just sketch some things out. And I think that sometimes you just need some basic things. And so, we've added a lot of abilities to really help designers lay things out. So the other thing that I want to talk about too is masking, and that's something that happens by using just the shape layers themselves. So in this case, I want to be able to mask. Basically, I'm animating this in, and I want to be able to mask the tools on the side, these knobs. As this animation is coming in, I don't want to be able to see them. So I just basically built a shape. And then there's a little button down here. I'm going to pause this, and I'm going to zoom in here. And you just, under appearance, you just check mask with shape. You can invert. This is what I had to do in this case. And now suddenly everything that is within this group, all of these layers are going to be masked. And that's another thing that's really exciting about using this.
Could you zoom into that real quickly so we could see it?
Yeah. Zoom in a little more. Does that work?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah, so basically I put all of these knobs and sliders, I put them into groups. I like to stay organized, so I renamed everything. You can rename layers except for text layers, because those just take the name of whatever text you have on. And then basically that one shape that I drew, I created a mask, I inverted it, and now it's only going to affect everything inside of this group. So none of these other elements, anything outside of this group, will not be affected by that mask. And that's another it's another way of just organizing your things. And you can create as many subgroups as you want. So infinitely create subgroups.
And it's kind of crazy. I mean, I'm looking at what you just did there, that's built entirely in,
Yeah.
I'm actually looking at that going, can I build that? I guess.
I mean, really,
I'm a crap designer, but it's right. It's just basic shapes, right? I mean,
it's just basic shapes. The other thing that I like to mention that people sometimes don't know about is that you can start your keyframing in the EGP itself. So with your layer selected, let me zoom in here.
And I'm gonna move your camera for a second here, so don't mind me.
Am I in the right place? It doesn't.
No, I'm moving you. Don't you worry about it.
Okay, cool. It looks like I'm not zooming in to where I want to be zooming in on my screen. Let's see. Is it right?
Yeah, go ahead and zoom in.
Yeah, it's good. Okay, cool. Sorry.
This is live, friends. We're
we're figuring this out. So here's something cool. Each one of these little icons that let you know position, anchor point, rotation, scale, and opacity are actually buttons that will start your keyframing process. So one thing that I like to do is the moment you activate it, you get a keyframe in the ECP no matter where you are. And so one of the things that I like to do is sort of what I like to call sketch out my animation in the EGP first. So I I'm moving my CTI back and forth. And for those of you who are not super After Effectsy and animated, these are keyframes. They basically say, I want this thing to move at this time, I want it to be here, and then the next time I want it to be in a different location. And the ECP can get a little unwieldy. There's a lot going on in it, and sometimes manipulating things in the ECP is not as fun to me. So like I said, I like to sketch out my designs, my animations, first in the EGP by using those keyframe toggle buttons. And then I go into the ECP and I start to futz with the timing and the curves and the easing. Then, I just will plug you're going to find out about this later in the week. There's something that is called the new Adobe Beta Prime program. And if you sign up for that, you get to see and give feedback on new things that we're working on. And all I'll say is that wink, wink, there's something really exciting happening with the ECP. That's all I'll say.
Yeah. Now, by the way, there's a couple questions coming in, and I thought maybe if you could probably show it. Also, maybe just also show some of the other options to bring content into Essential Graphics. So first one is, as you're showing this, you're talking about kind of laying out the design. Want to emphasize that people can also bring in, you can import, not only create shapes and text from it, but we have that new item button at the bottom right of the Essential Graphics panel that'll let you import JPEGs. It lets you import movie files. It lets you import Photoshop files. So again, you have kind of this endless way to import content to begin kind of sketching things out. And then quite a few questions here. I've got Keith Anderson asking about where these things live. And that's kind of another really great thing that we did with Mogert. So by default, of course, you can save it into your Essential Graphics local library, but you also have the option to save, sort of externally, so that you can Dropbox it, share it, email it, whatever you want, and then you just have that standalone .mogert. And then you also have our kind of choice option, which is to leverage CC libraries and save it to your own library or even a shared library. So kind of in this spirit of collaboration and working remotely, you're now my designer. Actually, and I'm going to ask you, you must share with me Cats on Synthesizers and Space. That's just like the most awesome.
I actually, I know you're a musician, and this is going to need a soundtrack, and I thought maybe you could throw some influences on it. So I left that to you.
I need it. But yes, but a shared library, right? So this way, I don't even have to think about it. You create a shared library, you drop it in there, I fire up Premiere, and suddenly it's Cats on Synths in Space, and it's ready to go.
Exactly. So, and I actually, as I'm versioning, I like to save as I go. So basically, you just right-click on the graphic item itself, and it brings up this export as.
Can we get you to zoom in on that too, please? Thank you.
I'm learning to zoom.
That's
all right. And so. Here, you could save to your local folder, or you could choose a different folder, or you can save to one of your many libraries. I have a lot of libraries. You can also add keywords. So I like to add things like I added NAB demo, and that makes it searchable later. That's going to export. Let me zoom out and just show. Now we're live in Premiere. And I'm actually going to cancel it because I've saved it a lot of times. So we can see here. And now if I search NAB demo, boom. Oh, I didn't put Cats on Synths. Anyway, it's right here.
Yeah.
You can also filter by your libraries. You can also, this is a little known fact, you can manage additional folders, and you can create a subset of folders on a network drive, on an external drive, somewhere else. And essentially, it's just another way to organize.
Right.
Your,
and you can favorite as well, which was, I think, also added last year.
As well, exactly, which I really love. So zooming through this, I just want to be cognizant of time, and I do want to get to AE. I also just wanted to show how easy it is to use Adobe Stock. I got these really cool space shots from Adobe Stock, and then ultimately, did a little something here, and then let's just get to the finale, which is, let's just show what we made here. And again, Jason, this is going to need some of your help.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, this is my shout out to my favorite Instagram channel, Cats on Synthesizers in Space. If I were making a documentary, I would want to make it about them and be just for fun. And this would be my opening title sequence for it.
This could be the new Tiger King. The Cats on Synths Queen. That's
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so we only have like 9 more minutes.
Yeah, we could go another 19-ish.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we got some space. We got some space.
Good to know. Okay, cool.
So, were you gonna now go into some of the After Effects stuff, or?
Yeah, I was thinking so. Okay, so there's a couple things in After Effects that I want to go into. Maybe I won't go through this. I'm not even gonna do that. I'm just gonna go into this. So, let's start in Premiere. Okay, so, one thing I've been noticing on channels like Freeform and Discovery is that they're adding little lower video into their lower thirds. So this was actually an ad for the movie Solo. It was a little, in-screen ad like tomorrow at 9 p.m. Solo was going to be shown. So this was the inspiration for that. And that's this little lower third here for a show that I call Pet Wars.
Nice.
It doesn't exist yet, but I think it should. Who are the cutest animals? I don't know. So yeah, this is a little lower third I built. And one of the things, so this is the thing, here are my collection. And if I just click on this, I can see that I've got some controls. So, like we said, there are some things I can edit. Maybe we want to change the name of the show to Animals, and we want to say that it's on Friday. And maybe we want to make everything just a little bit bigger because we want it to be on screen. So we're giving a little bit more accessibility to everyone. And now, there we go. We've got this name Animals. And notice that as I change the words, all of these bounding boxes and everything dynamically shifted with the when I change the words. And I'm going to get into that in After Effects in a second. But I put some hard-coded values into that. And I'll explain that in a minute. And so the dynamicness of this has some limits. So, I love a movie called Home Alone. Maybe y'all have heard of it. And one of my favorite lines from it is, "The filthy animals." And if you notice here, this suddenly breaks down, right? Like this padding is not working depending on how big this the string gets, the actual text gets. So we're going to come back in here. And basically what I want to show is, am I zoomed in? Yep, sure am. What I want to show is this is not new to After Effects in this year, but nobody has really been talking about it. And so one of the things that happened in 16.0, I think it was like NAB last year or the year or the Max before, is that we changed our expressions engine to be based on JavaScript to allow for more modern, quicker coding and language. And one of the things that I love about the After Effects community is that everyone shares their knowledge. There's a big Skillshare community. So, the way that I've been powering through expressions for the last 8 or 9 years has really just been by copying and pasting things that I find. Dan Ebert tells me, or E.C. Abrams, or Andrew Kramer, like you name it, there's always someone with a solution. The thing about expressions, though, is that they can get really unwieldy, and it gets really difficult to, if you need to make some updates in order to do something like source rect at time and be able to like make this whole thing dynamic, there's like 85 different places that you have to connect, and you have to update it, and if any changes are made. And so one of my really brilliant coworkers who I admire and I just learn from so much every day, John Colombo, has recently introduced me into this notion of using a JSX file. So
and hey, Dacia, can I get you to make the app fill your screen there, because we're seeing kind of the edges of your beautiful background.
I can do that.
There we go. All right, nicer. Okay. Perfect.
So basically, since we introduced this JavaScript engine, you can, and when I say you, I mean the more advanced users can create and then share, just like you've shared other things before. You can create basically a JSX file, which means that you've got all the code written in one single source, and you're creating functions that you only need to call once. And a good example of this is like wiggle or loop out. For those of you that have used wiggle in After Effects, wiggle's actually a lot of code under the hood, but for us, we just have to type in wiggle. And this kind of creates the same sort of scenario. So in this situation, when you have a JSX file, let me just do this and then pull up the expressions. So in order to make all these things connect, all I had to do was, let's go to the inner border. Okay, all I had to do was connect this size of this inner border to my JSX file. Let me zoom in there. So in the JSX file, there's something called auto scale at time. So I'm saying, hey, I want you to auto scale to the word title. So every time title changes, I want you to change with it. And I want you to not scale proportionally. And that's because all this information is basically in this file here. It makes it a lot faster for After Effects to do all this computational stuff. And then what I ended up doing, since we got in that weird state where if the text was too long, everything got out of whack, I just made the padding, I connected them to these sliders. So now if we go back to Premiere and we use this one, and I make this say filthy animals, and everything gets a little bit out of whack, not as bad. I also have these sliders here where I can just manually adjust until it looks good to me. But yeah, basically this is something we're going to be talking about more and creating some blog posts around. But it's a faster way to work. It's going to make your Mogerts a lot faster. I think this will be exciting for those of y'all who do use a lot of expressions in your work. And I'm really excited. And honestly, like, this is the first true dynamic Mogert that I've ever created, because using things like source rect at time has always broken my brain, and I've never got it to work right. So what I'm excited about is that introducing something like this can really help bridge the gap let's bridge the experts' knowledge to those of us that are a little bit more intermediate. Right. We've been dipping our toes, but now we can play in a whole new ball game. It's faster to create. It's faster. It's more performative in Premiere. Right. So just shout out John Colombo. We're going to have more of that coming along the way. And I'm really excited.
I was going to ask you if you could go back to Premiere for a sec, because this is also just one of the things I wanted to highlight. And we get asked this a lot. I know I do on my daily streams. People will say, well, how do I necessarily know if a Mogert has been created in After Effects? Granted, we have the info button, but not everybody sees that if they're looking through Adobe stock or something.
That's right.
So, and this is kind of the perfect illustration, because before you were talking about how in the EGP, when you're editing, it can get a bit cumbersome. The big differentiator here is that when you bring in an After Effects Mogert, the editing is done directly here as you see in the EGP, whereas with Premiere-based ones, you can edit inside the effects controls panel. You kind of have different options.
That's right.
We cleaned up the way they appear in when you're making Mogerts and how they appear in Premiere as well, right? Because now you have like the commenting fields and you can organize things. It's a different look, but a cleaner look as well.
Yeah, the thing is with After Effects ones, the UI is going to depend on what the creator sets up for you and how they organize it, and stock is a really good way to learn. So I do want to shout that out. Like if you go to Adobe Stock, you can go find free Mogerts right away. And they're a really great way to learn kind of what's possible. These are going to be the kind of Mogerts that, oh, come on. These are going to be the kind of Mogerts that are not going to allow me to add them to this timeline at the moment, but they're going to have a lot of controls. They're going to have a lot of things, and they're a great learning, a great learning tool as well. So that's something I always love to tell people.
And I was going to ask you. Now I don't know if you have any Mogerts. After Effects created Mogerts saved locally, but this is something else that gets asked all the time, and there are a couple of people asking here in the chat. So you also have the option, and it's a little, I don't know that it's so much as hidden as just that it's not I certainly talk about it, but the info isn't kind of obvious, that if you have a Mogert, you can reopen and reveal, because you're talking about sort of learning how things are built.
That's right.
You can reopen Mogerts in After Effects, but the key to it is you're not importing, you're opening them as a project. I think that's where people get a little lost. Yeah,
so you've got to do a file open. So one thing to do, there is a motion graphics templates folder that is hidden deep in your system. Or if you were just to download it from the stock website, you could download it to a place that's really easy to find, like your downloads. And then you open up After Effects, and then all you have to do is do file open project.
Yeah.
And let's see if I can find one real quick.
And if not, I've got a couple loaded up here if you're
searching. Let's try this one. And what it's going to do is it's going to ask you, where do you want to extract it from? Because the thing is that this Mogert that's shareable via email, via Slack, via Creative Cloud libraries, it's like this little container. It's got the After Effects project and any related media inside of it. And so all it wants to know is, where do you want me to like put those things so that we can reference them? And I'll just say that. And then pretty soon you've got the After Effects project. Boom, boom, boom. And this is a really killer way to see like how are things being made. I learn a lot from this for sure.
Totally. And this is something you can do even with the free ones from stock, like you said.
Absolutely.
There's some amazing stuff from like Andrew Kramer and some of really the top.
Wave Break Media is one of my favorite. I mean, they make some really fun stuff that's very like retro 80s and 90s. Like they're always just bringing it. And I really like them.
And the nerd in me always wants to know, how did they achieve that look? Like you see tons of them now with kind of the glitch. So again, it's kind of taking that step from the 80s, 90s retro. Now you're kind of seeing that glitchy RGB sort of thing. It's almost getting a bit over.
And they're doing it natively in AE.
Natively, right.
Since it's on stock, the stock creators are not allowed to use third-party apps. Right. And that's one of the things a lot of people ask. Not everyone can afford a bunch of extra scripts, tools, and plugins. And so I think it's an awesome learning opportunity to see like how you just do it in AE natively.
Right. And that is worth mentioning too. So with regard to both fonts and plugins, you can still build Mogerts that use fonts outside of Adobe Fonts. Of course, the benefit with Adobe Fonts is that if you don't have that font installed or your collaborator doesn't have it installed, if it's an Adobe font, you'll get a message. Actually, you'll see a little box, a triangle with an exclamation telling you don't have the font licensed. It will do the licensing for you upon download or licensing the Mogert, and you're good to go. It'll always display properly. You can still use third-party fonts, but it just means that whomever you're sharing or collaborating with, they must have that font. Otherwise, Premiere will display it, but you won't be able to edit it in that font. And the same goes for effects. If you're using some of your favorite third-party After Effects plugins, Trapcode Shine, something like that, whatever it is, and you build a Mogert with that, you can share that with others, but they have to have that plugin installed. Otherwise, it's just not going to display properly. Yeah.
Exactly. So in my what do we call it?
We've got like 5 minutes.
In my overtime, I just want to shout this other really cool thing out, especially because there's a blog post that the really rad folks over at the stock team, Teresa and Nick, they put together sort of like a starter kit So one of the things that's been notorious to After Effects is that text properties were not something that you could use in expressions. In other words, I couldn't tell this text layer to do anything other than grab the actual text from that text layer, but I couldn't send over the font or the color or whatever. And so that got added in 17.0, and it's really rad. So one of the things that I don't know, I love the new Queer Eye on Netflix, and so I sort of took this as an opportunity to make something. We also added something called drop down menus, and so this is a little bit more advanced. I'm going to go into the project too to show what's going on, but basically, I kind of tried to do that like CMYK thing that they do in the intro of Queer Eye, but I did it with my pets instead because they're real cute.
Using Jonathan, whom I often get compared to for some reason.
So charming, charismatic.
Maybe it's the charisma. Yeah, we have a similar look, And I did do my black and white hair flip on my Twitter page I was kind of borrowing from him.
I saw that flip, and
I'm a fan. Not gonna lie to you, I love him.
He's amazing. He's amazing.
Yeah, he is.
So here we have, this is for the putting the bumpers. The stock modes are gonna let you do whatever you want. These are putting bumpers in. Here I've got one of our new expression controls, which is a drop-down control. I've said to the editor, you can have 4 choices of font. You can do Vortis, you can do Continuo, you can do Amboy, or you can do Acer Bat. But that's it. You can't do anything else. I've also set up some color themes. There are different color themes going on here. So if I kind of scroll out, you can see there are basically 4 different color themes that have gone out. I really like the neon though. I've also said, hey, we can change the font sizes on both the title and the subtitle here. And then I've added some controls to be able to move these depending on where the shot is, you can move it around. So here's more of a final version of that. Got Olivia, great at grooming. We've got Sam, such a surfer, and then we've got Bodhi. He's just living his best life every day. That's all he can do, So let's go into After Effects real quick. Boom. And there's a lot going on in here. This is a very complicated expressions situation. But the biggest part about this, you can always right click on a control to reveal it in the timeline. So we have all these drop down controls, and what we did in these pre-comps is I have this is the primary text layer, the pink one, and the other 3 are all looking at it. So they're getting their style and their source text in this case from the one source. So you got a source, which is your text, and then everything else that follows it. And then we also, of course, are using these other expressions here to drive the drop-down menus, the limitations around font size, around color themes, around what else? Font size, and color themes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So you can do a lot of really fun stuff now. I know, it is in vogue to see a lot of texts and things that are echoing and animating in different ways. Now you can really easily just shoot the one information to all the other text layers and just drive from there. Lastly, I'll just show.
One more. All right, last thing, because we are just about out of time.
There's this really great blog here to get you started, and so you can start understanding how those relationships work, and just start playing, and hopefully you'll be making magic in no time.
And we can get one of our mods to go place that link in the chat for us. Dacia, this has been so awesome having you. And it's funny, people are like, I'm watching, reading. There's a lot of questions that are being answered by all of our lovely Adobe people in the chat as well.
Thanks,
But
y'all.
so many people are saying you're kind of blowing my mind with all of these things and saying things like, I didn't know stock Mogurts were customizable. I didn't know you could open Mogurts after the fact. I didn't know there was a difference between the Premiere and After Effects Mogurts. I mean, this is exactly why we're doing this. This is exactly what these streams are all about. You can
Totally.
catch them every day, but this is special because you've got all these Adobe people here to talk to you. We are listening. We are here. We are listening. We are here. We are here. We are here. I was just watching.
And we
Horton
love
music.
you. And like, we want to make life
Yes.
easier. We really do. I know
Yes.
sometimes it feels like, why is this so hard? But like, we're working really hard to try to make things less hard and get, the tool help your creativity versus get in the way of it. And that's our goals. That's
That
the
is-
North Star.
That is the goal indeed. So again, Dacia, thank you so much
Thank you so
for
much,
joining
Jason.
me. Now, coming up in approximately 19 minutes, we've got Eric Demusi, who's going to be showing some incredible After Effects compositing and how he did this compositing work in both After Effects and Premiere. You definitely want to check that out. I mentioned at the top of the hour here. Crazy stuff. I mean, the stuff that Dacia just showed you, incredibly inspirational for getting into MoGraph. If you're thinking about compositing and sort of like high-end film workflow on a budget, the stuff Eric's going to show you next it's crazy. So again, thank you so much for joining. We'll be back in approximately 19 minutes. So stick around or come back in at 10:30 Pacific time. And until then, have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, evening,
Have a
wherever
great
you are
day,
in the
y'all.
world. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.